Hi, my name is William Massam. Welcome to my presentation for Unit 9936, A Global Economy. Today I'll be giving a presentation for a hypothetical business, Tech Connect, and hoping to justify the business strategy moving towards globalization and global market entry. The hypothetical company at the center of this presentation is Tech Connect. Tech Connect is a non-profit organization that aims to connect people in developing countries with people in developed countries who are able to support them and provide them with uh, information communication technology that they can use to improve education, living standards, and develop their communities and economies without the need or coercion that they might get from a multinational corporation or a more traditional form of globalization. When you're developing a multinational business or preparing to take an existing business global, it's important to do a self-assessment. This is asking a few crucial questions to decide whether the decision to go global would actually benefit the organization and the stakeholders. The first question would be, what are the potential benefits of going global? For the organization Tech Connect, the main benefits would be humanitarian, the educational, the support and the mentoring, the access to new technologies and technological development that would be made available to these communities would be the main benefits. You would then ask yourself, do we have the necessary management skills? This is a very prudent question, very applicable to Tech Connect, as it would be dealing with a very wide range of cultures and communities, different languages, different customs. There would be a very broad range of communication and management skills needed to be able to effectively manage stakeholders and participants across that many areas. Uh, the final question would be, will the costs outweigh the benefits? Um, as a not-for-profit organisation, they would have a they would have an obligation to the people who invested and donated money that they would need to see a good return uh, for the money that they invested. They would need to show that they were doing good work and that they weren't wasting the money. Um, but that would definitely be possible with this venture. The main mission for Tech Connect is to help empower developing communities by providing access to education through new technology, both using things like information and communication technology such as the internet. They'll be able to provide support and mentoring programs as well as education to communities that otherwise wouldn't be able to access this. Um, the main reason for providing this service is to help combat the exploitation that's faced by people in developing countries from multinational corporations by giving them the tools to develop their own local economies through grassroots projects and to access information and education without coercion or things like that. When creating a multinational business, it's important to do an assessment of both the internal and the external environment. The first step of the internal assessment is to look at the strengths of the business. In the case of Tech Connect, the main strength would be the flexibility of the business, and the main weakness of the business would be that the labour support that it would require to look after all the different aspects of the business would be very labour intensive and perhaps would have to rely on volunteers. Um, Next, looking at the external assessment, using Porter's 5 forces of industry competitiveness, um, we would look at the buying power of buyers. But as this is a not-for-profit organisation, you would look at it more as is there a need for this service? In which case we would say yes. There is a large amount of communities without access to the internet or to education. Secondly, we would ask the bargaining power of suppliers. But again, as a not-for-profit, we would ask, is there a supply? Um, and yes, indeed, there are other organisations who are currently providing similar services, such as the Gates Foundation, but would argue that there is still not enough supply to meet the demand. Thirdly, we would ask, is there a threat of new entrants? And we would say with this particular case that no, that wouldn't be an issue. Similarly, with threat of substitutes and industry rivalry, it would be more chance for potential collaboration even, and that would not disrupt the business plan or their ability to provide the service. When choosing which communities to provide this service to, Tech Connect would be advised to provide a market entry analysis. One way of doing this would be using a grid technique to compare potential candidates. This would compare different candidates on a standardized range of variables, such as cost to the business to provide the service, as well as things as how they may benefit from it. This would allow them to find a balance between communities who may be more expensive to reach but might benefit from the service more than more accessible communities. For TechConnect's business approach, they would implement a transnational business strategy. This is where they adapt their business practices to suit the local environment that they're operating in. By adapting the service provided to each community, TechConnect would be able to provide the greatest impact possible with the limited resources at its disposal. Similarly, with their foreign investment and entry approach, TechConnect would take a polycentric business approach, where they acknowledge that each community has its own culture and will require a different entry and management approach. This approach will require a large amount of cultural training, which has been highlighted as one of the potential challenges for this business. This approach would also work best if communities in question are given greater autonomy over how they would develop, so that any cultural or economic differences would be less of an issue. One of the main key business functions for Tech Connect as a non-for-profit organisation would be fundraising, would be sourcing and selecting suitable candidates for support. All possible negative and positive consequences would need to be considered when deciding which communities would be selected. Sourcing and distributing hardware and software to the selected communities. This would need to take into account possible redundancy that might occur in the technology or how repairable the technology is. Providing networking services, would be putting those communities in touch with people who can mentor them and who could provide education and further advice. Providing continuing support and guidance to the communities would be a key business function, which was outlined as one of the main main needs for very labour intensive and human resources intensive activities. Finally, when summarising Tech Connect, The opportunities that this would provide would be for an exponential growth in these communities. It would provide a potential to start a movement that would build upon itself as these communities increased education and built up their economies. Looking at the challenges, one of the main ones is the remoteness of the communities. Actually supplying the hardware and the software as well as maintaining it um, would be very challenging in some of the more remote areas, as well as things as such as off-grid power, requiring a large amount of hardware and initial capital investment, um, as well as the broad range of cultural training that would be required with such a broad selection of cultures and communities, and the need for cultural sensitivity training and even language training, um, as well as one of the other challenges, which would be the potential for low initial level of technological literacy coming from communities with little to no uh, technological use at all. It may be very difficult for them to initially pick up and learn the technology. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much.